Yeah, I think we can get started on the event.
Super. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just do an introduction here.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll be starting now. So, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Winter Consulting Speaker Series hosted by Consulting and Analytics Club IIT Guwahati. So, I'm your host, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's speaker, someone whose career journey is a masterclass in, leadership, strategy, and impact. So, our speaker today is Mr. Aman Tomar, who is currently Associate Vice President in CEO's office at Spinny. So in this role, he leads enterprise-wide AI implementation and operations excellence initiatives, helping scale one of India's most dynamic internet services unicorns. So Mr. Aman brings with him rich experience as a strategy consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, where he designed and deployed enterprise transformations and growth-driven strategies. So before BCG, he's also worked across leadership roles in Oyo, Rivigo, and Flipkart, contributing to supply chain optimization, revenue strategy, and major digitization projects that improved operational efficiency across India's logistics ecosystem. Academically, Aman is an alumnus of two prestigious institutions, IIT Guwahati, where he completed his engineering degree, and also the University of Virginia Darden School of Business, where he earned his MBA and strengthened his expertise in leadership and general management. So, beyond his professional work, he's also a career mentor and leadership coach, having supported many young professionals in honing their problem solving skills and accelerating their career growth, a mission which is perfectly aligned with today's event. So, please join me in welcoming a leader who has excelled across top tier organizations and continues to inspire the next generation of consultants. Mr. Aman Tomar, sir, we're very honored to have you with us today, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Kirtana. Wow, that was a very warm welcome. Wasn't
Thank
expecting that, but thank you so much.
you.
First of all, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking out the time to be here today. And if you can just quickly go to the next page, Kirtana. My only humble request from everybody, I don't want this to be like a one-way communication channel. I want the participants to be as curious, as open in asking questions. This is your time, and I'm here to literally give you my 2 cents on everything that is there on your mind. And please do not pre-classify any questions as too simple, too dumb, whatever. Every question is an opportunity for the entire group to learn, and we all have different stages of understanding of what the topics are today, right? So I would love to just see an open, engaging discussion versus this being like a one-way channel, right? With that, I think we are good to go on the agenda. So a few things that I had in my mind to cover were just to give you like a top-down understanding of what consulting really means in practice, uh, some of the problem-solving tools, and a thing that that literally serves as the bread and butter of every consultant, the term called MISI. A few examples and insights of my projects and the nature of environment that I have kind of seen and experienced at BCG and startups. Some of the skills that have helped me understand both the roles and also kind of have helped me excel at these roles and in general, like build my professional toolkit. And at the end, we'll also just save some time for some targeted Q&A. And Ketana, if you can probably keep a tab on the questions that come in the chat across this file, that would be helpful. But
Yes, I will.
don't want the group to reserve their questions for the end. Please keep putting them in the chat, and as we go, we'll try to take questions as we flip the pages as well. Great. Um, well, with that, very high level, what is consulting in practice, right? Um, so the term consulting means advising, right? And by very nature of the term, we are people who basically become thought partners to any C-suite executive who has a key priority in their heads that they probably cannot give to somebody in their own team, or even if they have given something to their own team, they want an outside in perspective. What happens when you're running these very complex day-to-day P&Ls, it becomes very difficult to sometimes take a step back and look at something from an outside in perspective or do a very unbiased independent research. That's what I think consultants bring to the table. Over the years, most of the consulting firms, they have built enormous knowledge capital by working with clients and across, in fact, like not just clients, but like a matrix of clients slash topics from all over the world. And hence, the wealth of information available to them across any of the problem statements is something that cannot be ignored, which is what most of the CEOs or uh, any other senior VPs or senior executives in the firms, they tend to favor, and they tend to, in fact, get information about. Um, the nature of the engagements typically stays somewhere about like 6 to 8 weeks, at least for one particular topic, and then these topics continue to evolve into bigger problems and bigger projects. That's when I think these engagements also kind of tend to get more evolved and deeper in the relationship. Some of the, a very high level example of some of the problems that I have seen. So I was consulting back in the US, and I was working for the BCG Dallas office. So there was a lot of interest within the Texas and the Dallas region about consumer group. When we say consumer group, all of your um, let's say the products that you use on a day-to-day basis, right? All of they fall in the bracket of what consulting firms recognize as consumer groups. But then there are like services like Zomatos of the world, Swiggy's of the world, Blinkits of the world, right? They have their own formats in the US. Um, and then a lot of interest in energy. So that's what Texas's bread and butter is about. So a lot of problem statements centered around energy and how um, there has been a different dynamic in how energy has been playing a role in the growth of different countries and how the supply and demand dynamics have been changing. And then some of the cross-functional topics which are very common in today's world is how can we leverage AI across industries, and what would be the different use cases within those industries where AI can play a useful role. And beyond AI, I think digitization all across industries has been a big topic in the last decade or so. So moving from very legacy IT-based systems to more cloud-based and cloud-native intelligent systems, and moving more and more decision making towards like algorithmic side versus like leaving the decision making to humans. That has been a big theme across the world and across the large organizations. So a lot of interface has been around those. Consulting firms play a huge role in topics like that because of, again, how they have seen those transitions happen across large organizations and bringing that knowledge in whenever that is a new use case for any organization. I'll just take a pause here for a minute and just see if that resonates with the idea of the group. But if there are any questions at this point in time, just very high level, like what do you think, or what do you understand by the idea of consulting? Or if there is anything particular that you want to ask me at this point, I would love to take a stop.
Yeah, there's a question. So Soumya's asked, what technical skills are required for consulting in this era of AI?
Great question. Uh, I front face this question almost every day because um, see the nature of what people already would want to know and what they would want to advise on, that is changing quite a bit, right? For example, if a client would come to us and say, hey, can you please benchmark and tell us whether we have deployed the right kind of workforce to do a particular task, right? Let's say this is a oil and gas company trying to understand, it has a certain size of upstream P&L, and trying to understand, hey, whether their operating model is efficient or not. That's how broad the problem statements are in a CEO's head, right? They would engage a consulting firm, and the firm would first take a stab at baselining the current state of the organization, as in purely doing nothing but trying to understand what is happening right now at the organization. That always involves understanding the current size of the workforce, that involves understanding the current processes of the workforce, what are the different levels and bands across which the workforce is organized, right? And once you have the current state picture put in the front of the CEO, then you start putting some sort of like benchmarking with the current state that, hey, this is your current picture. This is what best in class benchmark looks like, and how far off you are from the best in class. And that gives you insights, right? That's this data. That, hey, you are doing well in certain pockets, and you probably might not be doing well in certain other pockets. And when you understand that what are the areas where they are not doing well, you try to correlate those with certain hypotheses, right? Now, this entire exercise in today's world, right? Um, in fact, not in today's world. In previous world, if I were to tell you, before the advent of AI, all of this work was being driven by humans, right? Collecting data about the current state of the organization, where let's say these organizations could be very global in nature. Some of the data lies in parent organizations, some of the workforce and the data lies in some other parts of the world. Collecting that and bringing that into like one page, that used to be a humongous task, right? Um, and that used to take like 2 to 3 months in itself, which is why the first phase of every consulting engagement used to be about just current state picture or building a baseline of the organization, right? Now, with AI in place, I think a lot of this work happens a lot more faster, right? You might not need to talk to like 50 or 100 or 200 different individuals to collect this and build that into like a one spreadsheet of information, right? You can actually write intelligent algorithms, prompts for the agent or the AI technology to go and talk to these different distributed segments and then bring that information, collate into a certain format that you want, and then build the desired output that you're looking for. And all of this can happen very easily. Obviously, you would need to fine tune your outputs with some back and forth feedback mechanism. Um, but you still do need to understand how do you operate this AI, right? So the question was, what technical skills do you need today? I would say, A, you definitely need to understand how AI works. It's not the answer in itself. It is an enabler, right? Technology still existed before. Technology still exists today. It's just a better format of a technology, right? So you do need to understand what was the problem that you had to solve using AI, and then where does AI play a picture in that, right? So in today's world, I would say your quant skills, that meant just knowing how to operate an Excel, how to be good at probably doing the math, how to correlate metrics and stuff like that. I think that part is getting more and more commoditized because of AI, because AI is as fast as humans in doing that kind of work, right? What humans still do better is framing the problem and telling AI what to solve for. And that is still the intelligence that humans hold, right? So that's how I think you should be approaching both consulting and careers, and how to kind of be leveraging AI in acceleration of your career in today's space. Sorry for that long answer, but I hope it answers.
Yeah, that was a great answer. We have a few more questions as well. So another question is, can a BCom graduate with ACCA enter into the consulting field?
Again, a wonderful question. So, my first conversation with an ex-consultant when I was trying to recruit was something similar, and I heard many similar questions from the cohort of people who were recruiting. I loved that answer. That person said consulting is the most industry or background agnostic profession in the world. Like you could be anybody and anybody. You could have done um, some heavy quant. You could have done algorithmic trading. You could have fought wars in Afghanistan. You could have solved problems at a startup, or you could have built your own company. You still bring something to the table. I think I was muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So continuing on that answer, I think consulting is a very background agnostic profession. So everybody can offer certain skill set because the kind of problems you solve they are very first principle in the first place, right? So for example, I did not have any background in oil and gas, right? But yet I was sitting with the CEO of the world's largest upstream oil producer, to talk to them about their org structure, right? Because you are fundamentally put into places where you have to think first principle, upskill really quick, and understand about what are the key levers of, or the key drivers of that industry, right? So you do need to understand some things, but all of those things are very fundamental in nature, right? You do not need to be an expert in anything to solve certain problems. I know it goes against the idea that goes about in certain discussions today, that, hey, you have to kind of spend your 10,000 hours, become an expert in anything, to be able to kind of teach something to somebody. But I think business at the very core of it is very simple. It's very first principle, which is why most of your entrepreneurs, they are not like ex-businessmen. They're all ex-engineers, so to say, right? Because engineers are very first principally driven in the first place, right? Um, so yeah, you absolutely can have a shot at it. No backgrounds are like prerequisite to get into consulting. I think we have a very rich list of questions. Let me just
Yeah.
progress to a few other topics, and then we'll come back to these questions, maybe in the Q&A section or maybe in the middle of it.
Yes.
Okay. Kirtana, can you go to the next page? All right. So what is structured problem solving, right? Um, so here you see four boxes, which are basically the four steps of whenever you get a problem, how do you progress from the first day when you hear about the problem to probably the last day when you're delivering, or when you're probably towards the end of getting that output, right? First is you understand and you define or frame your problem very clearly, right? For example, hey, my revenues are declining. Can you help me? Like that's a very broad statement, right? But when you have to frame this problem, you try to kind of understand revenue is a mix of either uh, price per unit of anything or the total number of units of anything, right? That's what, if you take a product of these two variables, that's what gets you the revenue, right? And then within that, you can have like multiple sources of revenue in a company, right? So when you try to break this bigger block of the word revenue down into like multiple things, you try to understand, okay, where could the problem lie across these different subsegments? And then once you have kind of broken it down, and how do you break it down, right? To what extent do you break it down? That is something that is determined by this term called MISI, which means mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. And all of us here, most of the engineering audience here would have learned the set theory, right? Those beautiful Venn diagrams when we studied for JEE, where you would have probably drawn two circles and there was an intersection in the middle. You clearly define two sets into like three mutually exclusive parts. And then you probably kind of isolate each of those parts and look at those things individually to see what you can do to optimize each of those subparts. Like I said, the revenue example, right? Revenue is a combination of price per unit times the total number of units that you sell, right? And then there could be multiple products. So you could have a line item if you draw this equation for all of those products, right? To see where do you need to focus and channelize your energy for the uh, next few hours or next few weeks. Okay, the third box here says synthesize what, so what, now what. Understood. So the so what is the favorite thing of any consultant, right? When you look at data, you don't just consume numbers, right? Ultimately, you have to be asking this question, what do you do with this data? Like, and even when you, let's say, do some analysis, you get some output in your modeling exercise, you always correlate it with the first problem statement put out there. What do I do with it? How does this help me answer the question that I set out answering in the first place, right? How do I increase the revenue, right? So that's something that a consultant kind of develops a very sharp eye on over the period of their training. That every time you see a number or an output after your modeling exercise, you always correlate it to the core problem that you were trying to address in the first place, right? And then obviously, like the fourth box is once you have like a long list of things that you think that, hey, now when I looked at the data across the 20,000 things that I had to address, I found that I can do 100 things. But in any practical scenario, you cannot execute 100 things together simultaneously because you will not be able to do justice to all those 100. So you always have to optimize and prioritize resources towards the most impactful ones, which will give you results sooner, right? Um, and you will learn this that time and money are very much correlated. There is a time value of money, in fact. So you always want to be very cautious of what are your short-term fixes, what are your long-term fixes, and you have to be very conscious of breaking down those 100 fixes into which ones will give you results today and which one will give you the results in some time to come, and how do you have to distribute your resources towards both. And both are important, by the way, right? So that's the structured 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of a process of how do you kind of break a bigger statement down into first its sub segments, then focusing on each of the sub segments to generate solutions to address those individual pieces. And once you have those long list of initiatives come out, then how do you kind of prioritize those to see what can give you results when across a timeline. This is just an example of how a profitability tree works. And this is just one of the most common fundamental frameworks of business, right? Uh, what is profit made up of? It's revenue minus costs. So whenever there is a problem with profitability, there could be like problems with its revenue or problem with its cost. Now, if you further break revenue down, there could be problems with the pricing or problems with the volumes of anything that you are selling, right? Similarly, when you talk about costs, there are two fundamental natures of costs in any business. There are some fixed costs. For example, if you have to manufacture something, you first need to have a factory setup. Let's say you borrow money and you buy a factory. That's a fixed cost. Now you have invested in it, right? And then there are some variable costs. Variable means that something that increases or decreases with the scale of your business. So let's say in that factory, if you sell or if you manufacture 100 products, your cost is variable with respect to those 100 units. Tomorrow, if you have to kind of manufacture 2,000 products, your cost will increase with respect to those 200 or 2,000 units. So those nature of the costs are variable costs. And there could be problem across any of these, but you do not get to this level unless you break your problem down to this third tier or third layer in this profitability tree, right? And there could be further layers. You could be breaking price down into, hey, is it um, the price in a particular season or is it pricing across the season, right? And you would continue doing this exercise until you reach that most granular level where you see where do I now start summing up those Lego pieces to ultimately give benefit to my client, right? So I'll give you a very real life example of how I kind of saw this. I was working with Rivigo, which was basically a fleet operator of trucks. And we had about 3,000 trucks, lot of very complex network of B2B shipments carried across all over India. And my task during one of the quarters was, hey, Aman, can you please cut our fuel cost down by X%, right? And that's again that's how in startups or in consulting world, the problems will come to you. Somebody will just not give you like context to the T. Somebody will just hand you over a problem down and then you have to figure it out from there, right? So what did I do? I broke fuel cost into very simple, using the MISI principles into its individual components, right? So fuel cost again is a component of, hey, what's the price per unit of the fuel and what is the total units of or the volume of fuel that I consume. When I talk about price, I have to think about how do I optimize at what price I'm procuring the fuel across my network. And when I think of it in terms of practical business initiatives or situations, am I negotiating enough volume discounts from the people or from the refineries who I'm buying fuel from? am I getting the refueling done at the right states where the price of the fuel is the cheapest, right? Versus like if I'm, let's say, at a border of Delhi versus Haryana, and Haryana has a more expensive fuel, you must have done this, right? You would probably cross the border and get a refueling done in Delhi, right? If it's cheaper there. But am I doing that, right? Third is, do I have the right kind of fueling partners in my network that actually offer me the cheapest fuel, right? So those were actually the three layers that I created and thought, and probably the questions I asked to see if I could optimize for the fuel. Similarly, when I looked at the volume of fuel that I consume, it's a question of how efficient my network is. And it's again a further a question of, hey, how efficient are my machines, or how healthy are my machines, which is the truck in this case, and how healthy are my operators, which are the drivers, right? So am I getting the maintenance of all my fleet done on time? Are my drivers driving the trucks on with a certain standardized behavior? And then are there any fuel theft incidents? And if I can use some technology to kind of avoid those incidences of fuel thefts. So that would altogether control or optimize for the total volume of fuel that I consume to run my operation, right? And together, you see these are six boxes, which sort of, if at a high level, become six initiatives that can help control your fuel cost. In a real world, I would not run as one person six projects together. I would prioritize based on the biggest impact ones, and then I would distribute the rest among my team. Right? That's how the real world example of this would work. I think there was a comment about the slide not being visible clearly. Is this now clearly visible? Okay,
Yes, it is visible.
superb. Okay, and probably we'll distribute this presentation to you all after this, so you can have a deeper look later. So how consulting trains you, right? Like I said, so when you enter, you're pretty young, but you are thrown into situations which are quite complex. Um, Again, giving you an example, um, I uh, I was probably very early into this oil and gas engagements, and I had some background as a chemical engineer, but I did not have a hands-on experience working as a chemical engineer across my 6 years of pre-MBA experience at startups. But right on day one, somebody saw that I was chemical engineer on my CV, and a partner called me up and said, "Hey, we are trying to put up an emissions accounting framework in Middle East. Can you fly down to Azerbaijan, talk to the client, and start working with them in how would you measure how much emissions they have in their entire operation?" And believe it or not, like I was shitting bricks because I did not know anything about any of these words which he used, right? But somehow, because you are put in this situation, you have to now take care of how do you behave in front of a client who's a super senior person, probably a manager of $50 billion as a P&L, so very senior person. So that executive presence is something that is key, and you learn while executing and while kind of seeing your colleagues, how do they manage the clients. Hypothesis driven thinking is you're always questioning and answering, trying to get an answer to the why, right? Uh, yeah. So if you just in the previous example we saw for price versus volume of the fuel, I was always trying to generate a hypothesis. Could this be right? Could this be wrong? Could something else be wrong? Right? So you always have a list of potential what could be going wrong, a hypothesis, and you then prove or disprove that hypothesis to solve a problem. Third is comfort with ambiguity. Like I said, I had no prior knowledge about anything, but yet I was put in that situation. So I have to firstly feel comfortable about it. That is only when I would start to put my first principle thinking in. I would start asking the right questions in, which are the most relevant questions for somebody to look at that problem. When you are in an industry, probably you carry so much data around you or so much trivial information that might or might not be relevant, right? And hence, this outside in perspective by a consultant becomes very relevant. Fourth one is structured communication. And I cannot harp on the importance of structured communication enough because the only thing or only commodity that a senior executive lacks is time. Like they do not have the luxury of time. They would not have hours and hours free up on their calendar for anybody to tell them the entire book worth of knowledge. They are not looking for that. They are looking for very sharp narratives, and they only probably have like 15-20 minutes, and it's upon you. How do you want to kind of deliver the most impactful information in those 15-20 minutes? So you need to be structured, you need to be very assertive in your communication. And if you get any chance to build and work on this particular skill through any initiative in your current setup, if you're at an institute or if you're a young professional, do build this skill because this is very, very critical for your professional growth. And last bit, I think, um, yeah, last bit is I'll come back to the first and second one, but let me cover the analytical rigor, which is kind of obvious. Like in today's world, everything has to be driven by data. So you need to first be comfortable about managing data. If there is no data, then think about how can you generate data? How can you generate digital footprints to measure anything? And there's a saying, right? What gets measured gets done. And whatever doesn't get measured is probably happening, but nobody knows by how much and at what time or at what rate, right? So uh, in today's world, if you have a chance, uh, develop this skill set by quickly learning how to work with data, how to analyze data, how to use tools like Excel, Tableau, Alteryx, very easily. Like you can use YouTube and ChatGPT and these particular areas to kind of develop some easy exercises for you to get acquainted with how to use these tools to solve problems and how to operate with data, right? Now, the first and the second point, so for executive presence, this means that how comfortable you sound in front of an executive. Like a 22-year-old going and talking about what he or she, what an executive who's, let's say, a 50-year-old have had all his experience in an oil and gas industry should be doing for emissions accounting. It sometimes sounds funny. Why would that person be interested in giving any minute of his time to a 22-year-old, right? That's something that is determined by executive presence. If you take his time seriously, and if you are talking logic, first principle, driven by very strong rationale, why not? Age does not matter, right? All what matters is if you are bringing something credible to a client and you're taking his time seriously, and if you're contributing positively to the problem or the discussion that you're in, that is what we call as executive presence. And it is something, unfortunately, that doesn't come naturally, but you build it over time by being in those discussions, by being in those groups. And I think at college and at early professional stages, I think what helps is being part of those leadership committees, like take positions of responsibilities, work in teams, be part of productive conversations, productive discussions, right? Those areas make you understand how different discussions and how different people influence certain discussions, right? And that's something that helps you develop your executive presence. Hypothesis driven thinking. Hypothesis driven thinking is always proactively thinking again by putting your first principles in place, um, what would be causing a certain issue, and then going to prove or disprove that point by using data or by using some factual information, right? For example, in my, again, the fuel cost example, I mentioned, am I buying fuel at the cheapest price, right? To question that, I question three things. Am I asking for enough discount for the volume of fuel I'm buying from, let's say, IOCL, right? Then I would go back and check my contract structure with IOCL and see for the volume of the fuel that I've procured for a year, has IOCL given me enough credit or enough discount? So if they have given it, probably that's not causing the issue. So I have disproved that hypothesis. But if they have not, I have suddenly generated a lever that is going to give me some benefit, right? So that is what is called hypothesis driven thinking, that you always go in with certain root causes in your mind, right? And that is again a function of you as a smart person drawing up this profitability charts or profitability trees, and then writing what things could be causing the issue, right? Is that clear? I hope it's clear. Okay. Now we come to startups. Okay, that's my favorite. Um, so startups are a very, very different beast. Um, you do have to kind of put in your consulting toolkit, but unfortunately, if you haven't worked in consulting, if you have directly been put into startups like what I did, I worked for 6 years right after my undergrad. Um, I think some things that just genuinely help here is being, very comfortable with ambiguity, right? At startups, things are getting built. Things do not exist, right? Processes do not exist. Systems do not exist. Data does not exist all the times, right? You have to kind of put things together and build that Lego piece into like some sort of a structure or some sort of a project, right? Hence, many of the skills overlap with what we do in consulting, right? In consulting, also, like we don't get the most amount of data to the T from the client. We only get what we ask for from the client, and that too sometimes very poor quality and not 100% of the extent, but we do kind of work with whatever we have available. Similarly, at startups, you will always be crunched with resources, right? And hence, you will see that those who have worked at consulting, they become pretty good in environments like startups because their skills kind of organically overlap quite a bit, right? But yes, in the very nature of these roles are fast-paced, ambiguous, very, very execution heavy. I'll take a pause. I think there's a question here. Someone's trying to say something. Is there a question? If not, I'll just quickly cover this slide and probably I'll take a break and then cover some of the questions in the chat. Okay, I'll just quickly cover this, right? Prioritization and rapid decision making. I think we talked about it, right? At startups, you are on a hyper growth journey, right? You're literally trying to improve 1% every day and then probably, 25, 30, 40, 50% on a month on month basis. You again do not have the luxury of just waiting and making the most perfect decision. You have to be comfortable with making mistakes, but once you make mistakes, you document them and you do not repeat them. That's the recipe of a successful group or a successful team at a startup, that they quickly learn from some experiments that have failed, but they pivot towards something that gradually helps them move towards success. And then, yes, like I told, consulting toolkit being very similar in nature kind of becomes a superpower, right? All right, I'll take a pause here because I think we've covered quite a bit of ground and I see a lot of questions. Kirtana, if you can help me pitch in some of the questions which are different and have come up, I'll take some of those.
More of the ones which have come up recently. One second. Okay, so one of the questions we have are how can one build their portfolio to get into consulting, especially if one is non-IITian?
Great question. So like I told, degrees, experiences, um, prior certifications, backgrounds, they do not matter. Everybody is a fit for consulting, right? All it means is that the toolkit that we talked about, the mindset that we talked about, right? The areas that you have to bring in and address in yourself as a professional that we talked about, find opportunities where you can build these, right? For example, problem solving as a term seems very abrupt, right? Very broad. But you can always find problems in your life, right? um, if you do not have, let's say, a direct problem to contribute to, become a part of a team that is trying to solve something. Like if you're in colleges, you see problems. Like I saw a huge problem in how the student community used to manage mess and mess food, right? It's a huge problem which is still not solved today. but there still used to be certain efforts towards it. Like there was a committee that used to put together like a meal menu, and then they used to negotiate for like prices for students. They used to work with the leaders at mess or like the cooking community to kind of ensure that the quality was in place. But all of these things are like independent problems. If you become part of these, and if you try to think first principally and genuinely try to solve these problems, you suddenly start developing an eye towards how to improve things in general, right? Structurally. So that's a very small but practical step of how you can start building these skills, right, in life. So I would not restrict myself by saying that I like my CV today doesn't say I'm an IITian, non-IITian, BITSian, NITian, whatever. These are just compartments we have created around the society. They do not matter. If you have the right skills in today's world, I don't think these things are going to define your career. I hope that answers.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a more, I think, niche question. So for someone pursuing healthcare management, is it a good option to first go in general consulting and then become an SME of healthcare, or can I directly look for healthcare or pharma consultant roles?
Good question. I think it depends on, are there firms that specialize in healthcare consulting? I know a few, like ZS does. ZS Consulting or ZS Analytics is one area which works for most of the global pharma or healthcare clients. I do not know to what extent do their consulting practices go. Like, do they only get business at this, very surface level for with those clients, and do not get a foot in the door to some of their core business problems? If they do not, probably yes, it's a better idea to move to a broad-based, larger consulting firm like an MBB or an EYP or a strategy and then work with the healthcare practice of those firms, because I'm pretty sure these firms would be getting a crack at some of the l- most prestigious and the toughest of the problems in that industry, right? And hence, while solving for those problems, you somehow become an SME in that sector. So that would be my take on it.
So we have a question with regards to case study. So he's saying it seems practicing case study plays a vital role as a consultant. So how do I practice it and from where?
Uh, I think in there's a two prongs to this answer. In the traditional world, there were books like my audible guys.
Yeah, you're audible now.
I think someone by mistake removed me from the group.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh, for a moment, I thought I was being too boring, but good to be
no, no.
back. Anyway, so I think the question was how to prepare for case studies, right? I think there are some easily available, cheaper resources, which are like books, case and points, and most of you will have like some format of consulting club. Like this is a initiative taken by IIT Guwahati's consulting club, but most of the B schools consulting clubs, they offer free resources. Get a tab on those resources through books, case books, some practice material, some recorded sessions like these, right? And then go through them, right? That's the old way of like consuming too much knowledge and then kind of developing some sort of learning around it. Case competitions as well, correct, Prashant, right? So uh, you can definitely have a go at those as well. Now, there are some very interesting resources that I used, right? Sometimes they could be paid. Uh, but on YouTube, there are some free recorded sessions of interviews that probably aspirants have given to, let's say, MBB consultants, or let's say some other consultants. Follow those channels, keep listening to those interviews. Like, how was a prompt given and how did somebody solve the problem in that interview preparation, right? That I felt was the most empirically beautiful way to understand that, right? To understand the concepts, to put the preparation muscle together to ultimately get the right output, right? Then in today's world, you also have a chat GPT, right? Most of it's, I think there's a version of it like what is that tool called? Perplexity. I think Perplexity is free in all of the college campuses. You can interact with it, right? You literally tell it and give it a prompt that, hey, I'm trying to prepare for something. Can you help me devise a preparation plan and probably give me a problem statement to solve? Keep sharing your thought process and your answer with that tool, and that tool only gives you the feedback. I think that's a phenomenally great way to upskill yourselves in today's world, or at least just have that upfront skill built up to, let's say, 50, 60%. And from there on, you start graduating towards some of these mature resources to become perfect and pretty excellent at it, right? So those are the combination of tricks that I would use if I were you in today's time.
Yeah, actually, that was very helpful. But also adding to that, actually, our club had an initiative that we done this time. So we made an, a business guide and casebook. So which also has AI-based mock interviews added to it itself. So you can actually have interviews by yourself. You can also read the interviews and things. So I think, yeah, we've made a casebook, and I think it'll be helpful for a lot of people, so I'll just share the link for that too, if that's fine.
Superb, superb initiative. I think this is what initiatives and the consulting clubs across the country, they should kind of collaborate and be distributing the materials to probably those campuses which do not have
Mhm.
the luxury of having these resources in place, right? And everybody can have a democratic go at these kind of roles. So yeah, great job, Keetana.
Yeah, it's completely free and anyone's like free to use it. And yeah, I think even for me myself working on it, I think it'll be very helpful for people who, want to do mock interviews and other stuff like that. So thank you a lot for your appreciation too. I'll just add the link on the chat as well.
Perfect.
Also moving forward, another question that we have are that consultants use frameworks like MISI, Five Forces, etc. in real projects. So how often do these frameworks help versus how often do you have to build a custom approach?
Yeah, I think everything is a custom, like a very rote framework around, hey, if I go to a oil and gas client who's again like 50, $60 billion of a P&L and I say, hey, let me do a Porter's five forces analysis to you. The guy will be like, yeah, I have read the book as well. I read it probably 30 years back when I went to my B school. Don't tell me that. Tell me something that is more nuanced and specific to the problem that I have, right? So you always have to come up with your own frameworks. Having said that, while you're preparing, while you're building your skill set, when you're just beginning on the journey, you do not have to think about that. You first have to build your basics. It's like cricket, right? You first have to learn how to defend. You have to improve your stance. You have to literally watch your head position and you have to learn how to drive. And once you start mastering these basic skill sets, then you start gravitating towards, hey, can I just have a uppercut? Can I just have a scoop shot? Can I have something else, right? Some of the fiercer elements to my armory, right? So it's a process. So give yourself some time and try to master these basic force frameworks, skill sets while you are preparing, especially if you're early in your journey, um, using the resources that Kirtana just mentioned and I just talked about. But yeah, in real world, you will more often than not err on the side of building your own custom frameworks, which will come to you organically.
Yeah, thank you. So, another popular question seems to be what should a student portfolio look like to be shortlisted for consulting roles or internships?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I missed that.
What should a student portfolio look like to be shortlisted for consulting roles or internships?
Yeah, I think the student portfolio should be a representative of the skills that we talked about in the beginning. Whether a person has uh, participated in areas where a person got a chance to solve a problem, and what were the steps taken by the person in the direction of solving that problem. One part is, hey, I was a part of that committee and something happened. That did not tell me anything about you. What did you do yourself as part of that committee to solve a particular problem that was given to you, right? Um, so, like the mess committee member example I gave, right? Hey, probably put, uh, I created, let's say, a quality check process, which included 200 steps every 3 days to create like an audit mechanism of the food quality, and then channelize that feedback to the prepare food preparation committee to come up with like 10% errors and then reduce those 10% errors through those periodic checks. That together shows me that a person thought that let me put some sort of like auditing, let me record that auditing data, let me take that data to somebody who's preparing, like who's the in charge of food preparation, let me get reconciliation across or acknowledgement from that person who's in charge of that, and then once acknowledged, let us put a practice of how can they improve through that periodic check mechanism. That shows a process that a somebody can think, work with the like record data around a problem, give that data to somebody who's accountable to solve that problem, and ultimately track it diligently by putting, let's say, a periodic check in process in practice. um, so that has to be a part, like these kind of initiatives, these kind of exercises have to be reflective through your portfolio, right? Let's say if something did not exist, somebody says that, for example, like when I was at IIT Guwahati, there was no finance club. There was no consulting club also, by the way, in 2015, right? So we had to kind of build our own consulting club, right? Some of us got together and took learnings from, let's say, other institutes and put some basic resources down and started calling it, let's say, hey, from today, we call it a consulting club. So we took the initiative of starting something and we recognized the need to start something, right? So those kind of leadership things show maturity in a person that, hey, you are able to kind of identify deficiencies in a process, and you would be able to fix those deficiencies if you are put in those complex situations, right, in business environments. So that kind of a bridge you have to set up through your portfolio versus what is somebody taking out as a message from those experiences or those pointers that you put on that portfolio, which are relevant in the consulting world or let's say in the startup world.
Yeah, actually, there seems to be multiple questions, but due to time constraints, I think it would be better to move on with the presentation, and maybe they can reach out to you on LinkedIn with their queries if that's all right.
That's absolutely fine with me. And distribute, I think if you can quickly skim through the presentation,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
sure.
be more interested in answering the questions because the material is just commoditized. I mean, you will find
Okay.
this material everywhere. I would be happy to give you the insights that you're looking for from this discussion.
Okay, fine then. We could do a few more questions in that case. So another question that we have here are there any specific constraint the client has, for example, a no layoffs policy or a limited capital budget?
Absolutely. Like the world lives on constraints, right? Um, there is almost always constraints. You always have to think in terms of those practical constraints, and that's how your problem solving ability becomes sharp, right? If I was the prime minister of this country, right, and somebody told me, hey, can you solve India's GDP per capita problem, right? Or can you, like, what would a prime minister do? Hey, yeah, like give everybody a lot of money. Let's just distribute free money to everybody in the country, and that somehow solves the problem of poverty, like those who are like below GDP per capita in certain limits. um, Suddenly those people will come up, but then if you try to solve for just one thing, something else will get disturbed, and hence your ecosystem will get disturbed. And ultimately, if you see businesses, countries, any operational environment, it's a bunch of many inputs colliding and constantly competing for resources to produce an output, right? You always have to think of how to optimize and balance the available resources and the constraints, right? So it's absolutely important, right? um, just giving you a practical example, right? So on one of the manufacturing projects, uh, our CEO was a person who had grown up from ground up, right? He was on the shop floor himself, who used to kind of make these footwear. and stitch up those footwear himself. He graduated up the ranks over the years and became a CEO of that firm. So he understood the importance and what goes in the mind of a labor, right? And somebody who does that job today. If we kind of propose the idea of, hey, can we just fire up 10% of the labor, right? Who doesn't do, let's say, a 20 footwear a day kind of a productivity that can help you cut the cost. But that guy resonates the idea of what goes in the mind of a labor. And he said, I'm not going to cut costs. I'm a manufacturer and I'm going to take care of my people. So that's a practical constraint. Yes, no layoffs is a situation. So you have to think outside of the box.
Yeah, that was very insightful. So another question that we have is, sir, do you think that we are moving into the era where traditional degrees like MBA are not needed for consulting roles, as entrepreneurs like Nikhil Kamath and Elon Musk have openly discouraged people from pursuing higher degrees or colleges? So can a self-taught person without any brand name really compete with B schools?
Um, Short answer is yes. Um, more complex, more complex answer is that every human is not motivated enough to do that. And more often than not, these institutes become that place where you derive that motivation, right? Why do people uh, compete so heftily in their youth to give an exam called JEE, which is so difficult, and then try to be at IITs? It is not that they will get better placements. It is because that they find a group of individuals who are going to do great things in their life, and somehow their work ethic gets defined by being among these people, by getting inspired by these people, right? And the similar thing happens, and that's the role of institutions in the first place, right? I feel you bring together talent in one place to make them interact, create a learning environment, and somehow all of them become better versions of themselves as part of that process. So if somebody can replicate that by consuming knowledge through free resources, and through whatever available resources themselves, um, good job, right? Congratulations to you. And then you have saved a bunch of money on and time into going into these places and kind of get creating a better version of yourself. But more often than not, it becomes really hard, right? Um, I'll give you an example. Like my friends used to make a joke about uh, my ability to kind of finish tasks. Like I would take up some opportunity in let's say Alcher and in my year one, and then I would find it, wow, this is so boring. Like why would I put like posters in different hostels? Like this doesn't even sound like something cool and sexy that I would want to do. But ultimately, when I saw like everybody else doing it, staying up all night, doing it, finishing it, and probably getting the reward at the end of it, where your hostel looked beautiful, like people getting appreciation for the hard work they put in, the quality of work they had gotten in. I realized how important that thing was. And I got inspired by that one fact that the other kid did that job so diligently, right? So that's something that you learn only when you are among these very, very inspirational, sharp, and intelligent people, right? And that's the job of institutions. So that's my take on it, right? If you can do it. There's no harm. That's one of the right answers. But the other way of doing it is also not the wrong answer.
Yeah, that really resonated with me too. I think peer group is, very important as to how you're going forward. So another question we have is, please recommend some interesting books to read in relation for consulting and business.
Uh, I think anything that makes you think, and don't read fiction. Like if you're interested in building a real critical thinking skill set, move away from reading Jeffrey Archer's and Arundhati Roy's of the world. Um, Pick up some interesting business pieces and any book that offers like deep, uh, I would say like uh, rational or like deep perspective about a particular topic, like history or like anything economics, anything to do with like how energy plays a role in growth of the world, right? These topics actually make you think and give you a really top-down perspective about how, like, what drives the world, what drives the motivations of the world, right? So pick up any writers who kind of write on these topics. And because the spectrum is huge, I can't give you like one or two or three good examples. Please reach out to me if you're interested in getting recommendations about a certain topic that you're looking to get good books about, books on, or books about. Because I've kind of read quite a bit. I'll be happy to do that. But yeah, I mean, I'll just throw a name that I have loved to read more and more of his pieces about, like, is Yuval Noah Harari. He writes a bit about history, and then he connects all of the historical pieces with economics, and then how the outputs of current world are in the way they are today, right? And how we interact with them today. So he has present a piece on that, connecting with history and economics. It's phenomenal. So you can probably go and read some of his books.
Yeah, thank you. I'll drop your LinkedIn also on the chat. So another question that we have is, how do you usually begin structuring a new problem that has no clear data or direction?
Yeah, I think every business problem, um, if you look at the core of it, like if you bring it to a macro level, business runs on only one equation: revenue minus cost equals to profit, right? Every business has some elements which derive the revenue. Every business has certain line items that derive the cost. You always need to identify, okay, what are the things that are driving the revenue? What are the things that are driving the costs, right? And if you're able to get your hands on this kind of information, which is very basic, every business somehow has this information, right? We all know that every business understands what is driving, what is making them money, and what is making them pay for the services or the products that they are consuming, right? So if you kind of get this basic information, everything from there on is first principle, right? So you generally, if you have very less knowledge about the downstream elements of the business or the deeper elements of any industry, always start with what is the business model, what is making money, and what is making them pay, or what is making them cost, right?
Yeah, okay. So another popular question seems to be the technical skills required for consulting. So do we need to know ML and other data analytics tools for consulting?
I don't think so. I don't think hard skill sets are a constraint in the first place. These are good to haves, right? And it has kind of become important because more often than not, the enabler of every problem solving exercise is data in today's world, right? So if you know it, if you're comfortable with it, somehow you become very relevant to those conversations, and your speed to delivery to insight, it kind of accelerates super quick, right? Hence learning this tool today, which has also become very easy to learn, right? In our world, if we got stuck on a excel error, right, we had to go and read 20,000 documentation about that particular formula to understand, hey, I've made a syntax mistake to get an output. In today's world, like, it's become super easy to quickly correct your errors and learn a tool, right? So hence, it is all the more important in today's time to bring it under your armory already, right? Before you start your professional careers.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll do one last question, which is how to enter consulting firms if I'm not from top B schools in India, as consulting roles don't come for tier two college students. Anything of practical advice would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's we covered some part of it in the previous question, but yeah, I think if you're looking for how to get an interview, build a community or network of consultants, right? And what do I mean by that? You would have some friends, first degree or second degree connections, who would be working in these firms. uh, Maintain a warm relationship with these people, because there are many ways you can become a part of a consulting project at these firms. If not a full-time role, there are sometimes openings for a part-time role, right? But what do I mean by that? They can offer you like a 6-month contract to work on a specific project. And let's say you happen to be from one of those industries where you can add value, you can become a part of that project, right? The problem statement becomes how quickly those opportunities reach you, right? And they only reach you if you are well connected, uh, if you are well networked with people who are in these circles, right? So continue to kind of talk and have like coffee conversations, have personal conversations with people who are operating in the consulting world. Um, Second, continue to improve your skill set, right? The skills that we talked about, if you have the right skill set, you never know which conversation lands you which opportunity, right? So you from your end should always look to build a sharp communication, have a great problem solving attitude, have a great learning mindset, curiosity to learn about new topics. So the reading element that we talked about, continue to kind of consume good quality information. Do not scroll reels one after the other. Consume books, consume good editorial material that comes up on Economic Times, Financial Times, right? So these things kind of, you know, put you into the right track for somehow being serendipitous that one day the right opportunity will come to you, right? So that's my advice. Otherwise, yes, it's kind of hard that in India, especially because the industry is so small, the only hunting ground for talent for these companies becomes top tier B schools or let's say top tier undergrad schools. But again, it's opening up. The world is changing. The firms are realizing that their needs are much more than just these few schools. So they are also becoming very much open to moving to other alternate spaces to hunt for talent, right? So be on the lookout, and yeah, stay well networked in this area.
Thank you so much. There seem to be a few more questions, but I think due to time constraints, we'll ask them to just personally text you on LinkedIn if that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And it was great. These are very qualitative questions. Please do not refrain from reaching out and asking these questions. I might be a little delayed in answering some of them, but definitely log these questions in. And I'll be very happy if Consulting Club wants to take a note, shoot these questions to me, and I can probably send out a newsletter or something to you guys over this. But over to you guys. Was great chatting with you, and good luck.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Aman, for a very incredibly insightful and engaging session. So, your experience from consulting at BCG to driving impact in fast-growing startups, it gave us a very, rare and practical perspective on problem solving, MECE, and how these skills translate into real-world decision making. So, your energy as well and your willingness to break concept down so simply, I'm sure it has inspired everyone in the room, and I'm sure most of us are walking away with a much deeper understanding of what consulting looks like in practice and how we can actually start building these skills today. So on behalf of the consulting and analytic clubs and IIT Guwahati, we sincerely thank you for taking the time to be with us today and for sharing such a valuable lesson from your journey. And also to everyone else here, thank you for being such an enthusiastic audience. And so as we wrap up, if you again have any questions about consulting, please feel free to connect with Mr. Aman on LinkedIn. I have shared it in the chat. I'll just share it once again too. So yeah, thank you once again and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.